Psalm 32, the joy of forgiveness, verses 1 through 7 and 11. Happy are those whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered. Happy are those to whom the Lord imputes no iniquity, and in whose spirit there is no deceit. While I kept silence, my body wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me, and my strength was dried up as by the heat of summer. Then I acknowledged my sin to you, and I did not hide my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. Therefore, let all who are faithful offer prayer to you at a time of distress. The rush of mighty waters shall not reach them. You are a hiding place for me. You preserve me from trouble. You surround me with glad cries of deliverance. Be glad in the Lord and rejoice, O righteous, and shout for joy, all you upright in heart. For those of us sheltering at home in this time of corona, life has changed. Instead of rushing out into the world each morning, anxious to fulfill expectations, we are sheltered at home by ourselves or with family, along with Zoom, Netflix, and our own inner life. We have time to notice our own habits, our humanity, and our relationship with God. We can take time to reflect upon our attitudes and actions and sin. Psalm 32 is an invitation to acknowledge our sins, be forgiven, and find joy in the constant love of God. So, what is sin? Sin is anything we do that disrupts the flow of God's love through us and into the world. Words that belittle another person, hate in our hearts, taking more than our share of resources, revenge, greed, indifference. We usually think of sin as a constant condition. But in concert with this psalm, I would suggest that sin is more of a process, a circular flow that serves to move our souls deeper while releasing others from its effects, thereby shaping the ongoing story of creation. When we think of our imperfections as unforgivable, there is no movement, no life. Our connection to God is thin and feeble. But life is always moving, changing, growing, spiraling into and out of dark places like the galaxies spiral through space. Gardens return in the spring, and our wrongdoings become sources of a closer intimacy with God. Habit, inattention, and denial can cloud the truth of our ways in the world. But we need a catalyst to notice our separation from God's love, to see what we have done and the damage we have caused. Good Friday can be that catalyst. Corona is giving us the time. Once we've noticed, we can enter that deep and satisfying stage of self-reflection. As we confess who we are to ourselves, sincere emotions rise up: grief, regret, remorse, repentance, which rise like incense into the heart of God, where they are welcomed with joy and released. As we evaluate our motives and consequences, we expand our sense of the heart of God. In so doing, we knit divine principles into our souls, and we become wise. However, eventually we will become complacent or distracted, busy, and will inadvertently begin the cycle all over again. All this movement is lived from within God's love. God is like a cosmic vessel in which all aspects of forgiveness are in motion. The light of acceptance, the death of release, the resurrection of forgiveness, and the transformation of joy. Jesus' death on the cross was a sacrifice that showed in a painfully real way that life is eternal. Love keeps creating. And that creation is a constant flow between life, death, resurrection, and transformation, over and over again. That's how gardens grow. That's how people grow. That's how the universe has evolved over 14 billion years. Light comes out of darkness, good comes out of bad, and joy comes out of sin. This time of Corona is an unexpected opportunity to reveal ourselves to God and share in the joy of the universe.
Hello, First United Methodist Church family. This is Jeff Miller, and I've been asked to share a few thoughts with you based on Psalm 121. On this Good Friday, I want us to hear the first two verses of that psalm. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from God, the maker of heaven and earth. Did you hear? I lift up my eyes. This direction from the psalmist sounds almost inappropriate on Good Friday. Instead of lifting up our eyes, we traditionally bow our heads and listen to the solemn classical requiems and grieve over the suffering of Jesus upon the cross. Certainly, as Christians, we must reflect on the events of Good Friday and share in the darkness of those hours. We remember the day that Jesus suffered and died, crucified like a common criminal, while his loved ones looked on in horror. Today, I want to suggest that we should also listen to the wisdom of the psalmist, who wants us to lift up our eyes, to raise our heads, to look upon the cross, and recognize the gift of God's life-giving, life-affirming, life-preserving presence, seen so clearly in the dying Jesus. If we lift up our eyes rather than casting them down, we can grasp the truth that Richard Rohr proclaims, and I quote, "The cross can be seen as a dramatic demonstration of God's outpouring love, meant to utterly shock the heart and turn it back toward trust and love of the Creator." End of quote. The cross has a magnetism to draw each of us into God's eternal presence, where we find our place in the amazing realm of God today, tomorrow, and forevermore. So, dear friends of FUMC, on this Good Friday, while we are COVID-19 isolated, lift up your eyes, look at the cross with your head raised, and recognize in it the love that pours out of God's heart for every person, every one of us, every creature, and for all of creation. May we be so blessed by this good news on Good Friday as we anticipate the glorious resurrection of Easter.
As I read the 95th Psalm, I ask that we all listen to it in its entirety. Hear both the joy and the brokenness. Part 1 of the psalm was and is used to call the people to joyful worship. The second part of this psalm is a jarring warning referencing an incident when people, forgetting about God's ever-faithful presence, grumbled bitterly to Moses about a lack of water. You can read all about that bitter uprising in Exodus 17, 1-7. Hear now the contemporary translation offered by Eugene Peterson of Psalm 95. Part 1. Come, let us shout praises to God. Raise the roof for the rock who saved us. Let's march into his presence singing praises, lifting the rafters with our hymns. And why? Because God is the best high king over all the gods. In one hand he holds deep caves and caverns, in the other hand grasps the high mountains. He made ocean. He owns it. His hand sculpted earth. So come, let us worship, bow before him, on our knees before God who made us. Oh yes, he is our God, and we're the people he pastures, the flock he feeds. Part 2. Drop everything and listen. Listen as he speaks. Don't turn a deaf ear as in the bitter uprising, as on the day of the wilderness test, when your ancestors turned and put me to the test. For 40 years they watched me at work among them, and over they tried my patience, and I was provoked. Oh, I was provoked. Can't they keep their minds on God for 5 minutes? Do they simply refuse to walk down my road? Exasperated, I exploded. They will never get where they are headed, never be able to sit down and rest. It's a general theme throughout the scriptures. Life is wonderful and terrible. Both. It is both wonderful and terrible. That's the context of faith. 1, the joyous praise to God for this wonder-filled life, and 2, the anguish of brokenness in ourselves and in the world. Our joy would be shallow and naive if it did not also acknowledge the brokenness and terror of life. But God's love enables us to deeply and wholeheartedly embrace both the wonder and the terror we experience. Of course, Jesus is our example. On the cross, Jesus acknowledged both, 1, his anguish for the world, and even his anguish of feeling betrayed by God, and 2, his peace of fulfilling God's love and submitting his life to God's embrace. As with Jesus on the cross, we are invited to live a faith that faces life's anguish, knowing that we are ultimately held and called by a greater divine and loving power. To put it a little differently, we need to hold this inclusive context of faith. If on the one hand we live only to be happy, we risk living a self-centered, giddy happiness. On the other hand, if we only dwell in our pain or on the tragedy of life, then we risk being morose and spiritually disabled. But if we allow ourselves to feel our pain and to feel the pain of others, then we can embrace more fully the miracle of life and love that God offers us. Take heart. Even in the midst of brokenness in ourselves and in the world, we are held and empowered by a God to live courageously and lovingly. Even if we die, and of course we will, God is our shepherd who never abandons us. The presence of the Good Shepherd enables us both to enjoy God's gifts and to courageously love in spite of life's terrors. Thanks be to God. Amen.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. It seemed pretentious to comment on this psalm, but I accepted the invitation, and I hope that something in this meditation will speak to you. First, I wondered, what does it mean to be engaging this psalm on Good Friday? Would Jesus engage this psalm on the day of his crucifixion? The psalmist expresses the deep lament of knowing the darkest valleys and swells into a song of resilience and confidence. It calls us to wait, to be strong, to take courage, to do all of this in community together. On this day, Jesus cried out in deep lament, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, my God, why have you forsaken me? Would Jesus have offered Psalm 23 after that desperate cry of lament? I don't know. Yet I am led to ponder, are we able to offer this psalm during our current season of lament? For this is a season of lament. We are all grieving the life changes this pandemic has thrust upon us, and anxiety seeks to overpower us. And yet I desire to offer a strong yes to engaging this psalm that spirals with lament and resilience and confidence. Thomas Merton said, "We do not need to know precisely what is happening or exactly where it is all going, but we need to recognize the possibilities and challenges offered by the present moment and to embrace them with courage, faith, and hope." Possibilities and challenges offered by the present moment. Embrace them. In this moment, the psalmist invites me to be beside waters of rest, to take time to rest in the good, the true, and the beautiful. This may be very veiled in your situation, but may we go deep, and some kernel of the good, the true, and the beautiful will emerge. It is in that resting place that the psalmist engaged the reality of the darkest valleys, and there welcomed the truth that the darkness can teach us. Dr. James Howard Hill, Jr. profoundly proclaims, contrary to popular belief, things do grow and beautify in darkness. Light can be overrated. Contrary to popular belief, things do grow and beautify in darkness. Light can be overrated. Resting in the good, the true, and the beautiful, I desire to grow in this darkness and embrace this psalm of lament, resilience, and confidence on my journey. May you go with me. Yahweh is my shepherd, I shall lack nothing. This one makes me lie down in green pastures. God leads me beside waters of rest. This one keeps me alive. God leads me in right paths. And even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of all. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Yahweh my whole life long.
Hear this reading of Psalm 130. Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my supplications. If you, O Lord, should mark iniquities, Lord, who could stand? But there is forgiveness with you, so that you may be revered. I wait for the Lord, my soul waits, and in his word I hope. My soul waits for the Lord, more than those who watch for the morning, more than those who watch for the morning. O Israel, hope in the Lord, for with the Lord there is steadfast love, and with him is great power to redeem. It is he who will redeem Israel from all its iniquities. Psalm 130 touched me deeply in this season of social distancing during the current pandemic. I think this is a season where we all find ourselves in the depths. We have all experienced some loss during this time. Missed birthday celebrations and milestones, canceled graduations and family gatherings, lost jobs or steady income, lacking safety and support measures at work, alternate classroom and learning experiences, lack of human contact. In ways big and small, everyone has lost something. Perhaps in your grief, you have cried out like the psalmist. Perhaps you are just feeling really alone. When we are in the depths, we have a tendency to want to compare our cries to others. Whose is louder? Whose is more justified? Who is just overreacting? We judge ourselves and others, thinking no one feels the way we do. And this judgment prevents us from being present with our feelings and present with one another. If we are only hearing others' cries for the purpose of comparison, is it possible to really listen to one another? Is it possible to really be in touch with what we are feeling ourselves? In this season of waiting, I invite us to be present in the depths and to use this time to practice better listening. In the depths, there are far less distractions, and we hear much less chatter. In the depths, we might learn something new and find that through our pain, we have a heightened awareness of our shared humanity. On this Good Friday, I encourage you to go deep and listen well. Be present in the depths and be open to the power of pain to change us all.